Now, in the human case, values are conscious and chosen. Values are purposive because we do not automatically engage in a process of sustaining ourselves. And this is why we need codes of values. We need ethics, because in order to live, we have to perform a self-sustaining, a sustainable, if you like, but it's stronger than that, process by choice. Find one for ourselves and go about performing it and direct ourselves towards performing it. So in the human case, values are conscious and chosen. But because all our values are conscious and chosen, we don't automatically act for anything. And because our desires for things come from our values, there's one new element that we have to add or reintroduce in Atlas Shrugged, and you can see her in the notes for the moral basis of individualism realizing this. So a lot of her earlier notes take the form, and there are some phrases in the Fountainhead that take the form, we all want to live. Okay, now how do we go about doing it? What's the right way to do that? How do we achieve the goal of living? Well, you've got to be individual, you've got to think for yourself, etc. In the moral basis of individualism note, she kind of gives as an axiom from which she thinks ethics should start: man exists and his survival is desirable. So the idea is that a certain goal, survival, is just preset and accepted as an axiom. It's just the case that man's living, your living, is a goal, and you have to go for it. And what you have to do, what ethics tells you how to do, is select and choose the subsidiary values that will lead to this ultimate value. What she realizes in writing these notes, or anyway, marks down in some revisions of these notes to herself, is that even the desire to survive is not automatic. And this follows from the fact that we don't have any automatic knowledge or automatic direction. If the desire to survive was automatic, we would have to what? We'd have to know automatically what survival was, so that we could be directed towards it. What would it be to be automatically pursuing survival if you don't automatically know or find or seek out any of the things that are necessary for survival? And so the formulation that we get in Atlas Shrugged itself is not that ethics rests on an axiom of the sort, man exists and must survive as man, but rather that her morality rests on what? Does anyone know or remember? Choice. Well, it's two things, right? An axiom and a choice. So the axiom part brings in the facts. You exist, the world exists, you have a certain nature and the world has that nature, but also a choice. I want to live. So value depends on, the ethical code derives from this axiom and a choice. If you choose to live, then the issue of valuing arises, because it's only in the context of a living thing, something which is pursuing its own continued existence, pursuing its own pursuing. It's only in that case that the whole concept of valuing, the whole phenomenon of valuing arises. So life, the ultimate value, the thing which is an end in itself, is itself chosen as a value. Once one chooses it, it sets a standard by which one can direct the course of one's life, by which one can find a kind of life that is self-sustaining. One can come up with a central idea for what one's life will be. Say the central idea, Howard Rourke, architect, which will then serve as the standard for selection of the particular things that Howard Rourke goes after in his life, and which itself, the central idea for a life, Howard Rourke, architect, Henry Reardon steel maker. Meteorologist, but you want to get the, whatever, however you would describe the central idea of Reardon's life. This itself is in accordance with a standard of what kinds of lives, what kind of life, it's a concrete under the abstraction, man's life, the kind of life that a human being, the kind of process of action that keeps a human being alive, that is a human life. The result of all of this is, brings us to the thesis that we started with, that values are objective. Now this idea, the phrase values are objective rather than intrinsic or subjective is not in Atlas Shrugged. It's a later, in the article What is Capitalism, statement of the nature of her position. But the position is already complete in there in Atlas Shrugged. She just finds different ways of describing it and comparing it to other positions that people have held. A value involves, presupposes a valuer, and a valuer acting in order to keep being around as a valuer. In the human case, this is a conscious process. And so values or the good don't exist independent of men and their minds, but, and in particular, independent of their setting something as a goal for themselves, which they're going to pursue. There is no value that is not in fact an object of someone's pursuit. There is no value without somebody who is valuing it. But not anything that somebody might set as an object of pursuit is a value. For it to be the sort of thing that a value is, for it to have the kind of nature of values as something that's pursued for the sake of something, as something that a life can be directed around and towards, it has to conform to certain standards, the ones that are identified by ethics. So what ethics tells us is, as Galt puts it in saying what he taught the world, how life is to be loved. If you're going to value things at all, rather than to go about motivated in some other way, some way that is self-destructive and is essentially different from the way in which all living things act at the deepest level. If you as a human being who has to do this by choice are going to survive and what amounts to the same thing, to live, to proceed and go through one's life in this way, one must do it in a certain way. There's a way in which life is to be loved and pursued. And that's what Galt teaches us. That's what ethics tells us. The alternative is motivation not by love but by fear, which, again, I'm not going to talk about the nature of that. But that is the nature of that alternative motivation. I'll be happy to take questions on it, but it'll be a distraction to do it in the course of the presentation. But this gives us a lot of questions. This idea of a choice to live, or a choice to value or pursue things, accepting one's life as something to go after by choice, creates a lot of questions. It's difficult to understand in some ways, or has been seen as difficult to understand. There have been challenges to objectivism posed on the basis of it, or just confusions people have had, because it is a kind of bold and radical idea. So I want to just list some questions that have come up in connection with this. And I want to spend the rest of today